Having first entered the dye chasm in pursuit of visions of the missing deity Slanesh, the dread pageant soon became obsessed with torturing the mountain itself. In this video, we're going to show you how to paint Vasilak the Gifted. However, by following this guide and the colours in it, you can easily paint any other member of his warband. So when you're ready, grab those brushes, shape those paints, and let's get started. Before we begin painting, the first thing we'll need to do is undercoat the model. And as you can see here, we've used Corax White, which is perfect for all the colours we're going to be applying in this video. Now, the first area we're going to concentrate on is the skin. And I'll be using Guilliman Flesh thinned down with contrast medium. So 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Guilliman Flesh. So I'm going to grab a medium layer brush for this because I need a decent point to it as well. So I'm going to get a couple of dollops of contrast medium. Just give my brush a quick wash and get rid of some of that. Dry it off there on my tissue. And then 1 dollop of Guilliman Flesh as well. I basically just use the paintbrush because it's a good measuring tool. So instead of like trying to work out ratios, just use your paintbrush for that. Gives you a decent, accurate amount. So what I'm going to do is now just get a good point to this brush. So we do need a bit of a point to it. And then we're ready to start applying that to the skin. So the areas you're going to concentrate on is his legs and his arms. So just take your time. Once you've done it, if you have splodged in other areas, you can always tidy back up with Corax White. There we are, with that contrast mix now applied to the skin. What we're going to do now is move on to applying the rest of the colours to the skin. So we're going to start first by using Corax White. And what we're going to do here is use that as a layer just to highlight some of those raised areas, such as the scarification, knuckles, thumb and other details on the skin. After that, we're then going to do another thin coat of Guilliman Flesh, just add a bit more depth to give it some more layers. And then we're going to use Magos Purple just to pick out the scarification and finish off with some highlights here and there of flayed one flesh. But first of all, let's start with that Corax White. So again, just a little bit onto the palette, a little touch of water. I'm using a small layer brush here as well because it's got a nice point to it. And we are doing a little bit more finer detail as well. So once I've got a good point, I'm going to start on the actual fingers and knuckles. And all I'm going to be doing there is just picking them out like so. You can also do the same thing with all the scarification around any other areas that you think need it. Actually, the important thing to do with the scarification is don't just do smooth lines all the way along, do little dots as well, so it kind of gives it more of a scarred kind of feel to it. There we are, the Corax White now layered. What we're going to do now is use the same mix of Guilliman Flesh with contrast medium just to do a second coat to add a bit more depth and richness to that skin. There we are, with that Guilliman Flesh mix now dry. What we're going to do now is use Magos Purple just to pick out some of the soreness of that scarification. So I'm just going to go all the way around like that with Magos Purple. Just give it a bit of a pinky hue. Just keep going down to get more. Take your time, just build it up. There we are, with that Magos Purple now picking out the scars. What we're going to do now is use Flayed on Flesh for final highlights, both on the skin and some of the scarification as well. I'm just going to start picking out some of the little bits of the flesh there. And again, the other little dot here and there on the scars too. There we are, the skin now done. What we're going to do now is move on to the next area, which is the black leather. So we're going to start by applying Black Templar first to these areas. Once that's dry, we're then going to use Dark Reaper as a highlight and finish off with a final highlight of Fenrisian Grey. But first of all, let's start with the Black Templar. So I'm going to be using a medium layer brush here. I'm also going to be applying it to the palette. This is not to thin it down or anything. This is just to load up my brush and get a decent point to it. So once I've done that, we're ready to start on the leather. So there's a few areas to concentrate on. You've got his boots to do. You've also got this undersuit on his armour. And of course, these little straps on the actual pole of his weapon there. So I'm going to start with the boots first and just work our way around. Some places you might want to do a second coat if it doesn't feel like it's too dark for you. There we are, with that Black Templar now dry. What we're going to now do is use Dark Reaper to start our first highlight. We're just going to make this one a little bit more broader. So when we do the second highlight after, it gives you a bit more definition. There we are, with that first highlight of Dark Reaper done. We're now going to finish off with a little bit of Fenrisian Grey. I'm not going to highlight every edge, just going to do like little corners here and there, and just so far down. Again, just making it slightly smaller so you can see the other colour beforehand. There we are with the black leather now done. We're going to move on to the next area, which is to paint the interior of the cloak. Now we're doing this a light purple, so we're going to start off with cacophony purple. Then we're going to use Magos purple just to run into the recesses. We're then going to tidy back up those raised details using cacophony purple again. Then finish off with some final highlights of Tequila lilac. But first of all, let's start with that layer or base coat, should we say, of cacophony purple. So I'm just going to apply a little bit to the palette, a little bit of water, mix it together. And as always, get a good point to your brush. So I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is just start coating. So you've got a few little tricky details. So if you thin it down a bit more, it might be a bit easy to get into some of those nooks and crannies, but just take your time and work your way around. Like I said, it's then the interior of his cloak, so you don't have to worry about the outside of it. There we are, that interior cloak now layered. What we're going to now do is use Magos purple and start applying that to the interior of the cloak. Again, just let the pooling do a lot of the work for you in those recesses, because later on we can just tidy that back up with some more cacophony purple. Now, if you do find it starts to pool heavily at the bottom, again, just use your brush to soak up any excess. There we are, with that contrast now dry, we're going to use cacophony purple just to tidy up some of the raised details in the cloth. There we are, with that tidy up now done, we're going to use Tequila lilac just to do a final highlight. So I'm just going to start on some of the folds and work my way around. There we are, with the interior of the cloak now done. What we're going to do now is move on to the dark burgundy of the exterior of the cloak and also his loincloth. Now for this we'll be using Barrett burgundy as a base coat. I'm then going to shade the recesses using Nuln Oil, tidy back up with a little bit of Barrett burgundy here and there. Then we'll do our first highlight with Screamer pink, then finish off with a final highlight of pink horror. But first of all, let's start our base coat. So I'm just going to get a little bit on the palette, not too much, a bit of water, might get a little bit more than that. There we are. And get a nice point to our brush. So we'll start on the outside of the cloak first. I'm going to do the back of the model for this. You can see there, and then we're just going to start painting that. Just avoid getting that fur. There we are, with that cloak now base coated Barrett burgundy. What we're going to do now is use Nuln Oil just to run into the recesses. Just take your time. Now if you find it pooling at the bottom, because it often will, just use your brush to soak up any excess. There we are, with that shade now dried in the recesses. What we're going to do is just tidy up some of the raised areas, not the folds of these cloth, just to bring us back some of that Barrett burgundy tone. There we are, with all the tidy ups of Barrett burgundy now done, we're going to start highlighting using Screamer pink. Obviously you want this a little bit finer than the previous tidy up. Take your time, work your way around all those folds. There we are, with the Screamer pink highlight done. We're now going to finish off by using pink horror. And again, we're just going to make this a little bit finer than the previous. Just take your time, work your way around. You don't have to join all the lines up, so you can just do a bit here and a bit there. Mainly where you've got like little corners and real raised areas, like so. There we are, with that dark burgundy cloak now done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting his leather belt. So it's going to be a dark brown leather belt. So we're going to start with dried bark first as a base coat. We're going to coat all over that with Nuln Oil, then highlight up with Gawthor brown, followed by Baneblade brown. But first of all, let's start with the base coat. So I'm just going to, as we always do, get a couple of dollops of base paint, a bit of water, and as always, as I like to do, get a nice fine point. And then we're ready to start. So what I'm going to be doing is just picking it out. It's just his belt to worry about. On some of the other models, it might be in different areas, but for this particular one, it's just his belt. There we are, with the leather belt now base coated. We're just going to coat all over that with Nuln Oil. If you want it a little bit darker, just do a second coat. With the shade dry, what we're going to do now is start our first highlight, which is Gawthor brown. So you want this fairly broad in preparation for the next highlight. There we are, that first highlight done. We're now going to finish off the leather belt with Baneblade brown. Again, we're just going to try and make sure this is a little bit smoother and finer than the last one. There we are with the leather belt now done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting the metallic detail. So we'll start first with the silver areas. So for this we'll be starting with a base coat of iron hand steel. Then after that we'll be using Magos purple on some key details such as his helm and his shoulder pauldrons. Then we'll be using Ethematic blue on his shield and his blade, followed with Griff Charger grey. Then we'll do some tying up on all these details using iron hand steel, and we'll follow up with a highlight on everything with Stormhost silver. But first of all, let's start with that base coat. So I'm just going to get my iron hand steel, dollop some of that on. There's quite a lot of little details as well to just check out. So if you're not sure, just check the box off for details. So once we've got a nice point to the brush, we're ready. So I think I'll start on the shield here. So take your time, and you might want to do a couple of layers just to build up that colour. There we are, with all those silver details now picked out. What we're going to do now is use Magos purple. This is going to go on his helm, his shoulder pauldrons, the little sigil on the roundel on his chest, and also the haft of his blade. There we are, with those details now picked out with Magos purple. What we're going to do now is use Ethematic blue. So that's going to go on the shield, his blade, and the bits of scale just dangling down from the side here. There we are, with the Ethematic blue now dry. What we're going to now do is use Griff Charger grey. So just going to pull most of this into those deeper recesses just for some more definition. There we are, that Griff Charger grey now dry. What we're going to do now on all the silver details is start touching up and layering those raised areas using iron hand steel. Just work your way around. Just start on the shield here first. Make sure you do all those little silver details. There we are, with that iron hand steel tied up now done. We're going to use Stormhost silver just to highlight those raised areas, just to give it a little bit more bling. There we are, with those silver details now highlighted. What we're going to do now is move on to picking out the gold. So we're going to start with Liberated gold. We're going to base coat this over all those gold details. Then we're going to use Gunman flesh and coat that all over. Then in the deeper recesses, we'll use a little bit of Gorgrunter fur. Once that's all done, we're going to highlight back up with Stormhost silver. But first of all, let's start with Liberated gold. So I'm just going to get a couple of dollops. Actually, not going to even water this down because it's just perfect as it is. So what I'm going to do is then start picking out all the trim and gold details. So you've got a fair bit, so like the armour, trim, little fetishes here and there. Again, if you're not sure, just check the box art. There we are, with that gold now base coated. We're just going to coat all over with Guilliman flesh. There we are, with the Guilliman flesh now dry. What we're going to now do is use Gorgrunter fur and just keep it to some of those deeper recesses. So just apply a little bit here and there, just add a bit of depth and definition. The Gorgrunter fur now dry, what we're going to now do is use Stormhost silver to highlight all those gold details. Once you've done all the gold as well, you've got a couple of little beads just here. They're actually meant to be black. So just follow the black, like you did in the leather, just to paint those. It's worth doing it after because otherwise you have to neatly try and work around when you're doing the gold. So just do it once it's all completed. There we are, with that silver highlight now done and those black beads picked out on the chest plate. What we're going to do now is move on to the next area, which is the white fur. So for this, we're going to start by applying Griff Charger grey thinned down with contrast medium. So 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Griff Charger grey. Then after that, once that's dry, we're going to highlight up with Corax white. But first of all, let's start with our contrast mix. I'm going to get 2 dollops of contrast medium, like so. Give it a quick wash. Let's dry there, and then just 1 paintbrush of Griff Charger grey. Just mix them together, that's nice and thin. If you want it a bit thicker, just add a little bit less contrast medium. For this, I think it's fine. Once I've loaded up, all I'm going to then do is just coat that on the fur. And just take your time. There we are, with that contrast now dry. What we're going to do is just finish off with some highlights using Corax white. So as opposed to like dry brushing like I normally would with fur, all I'm going to do here, because it's nice enough as it is just pick out a few of the strands here and there with a little bit of Corax white. Not too much, I'm not going to go too over the top. Just a bit here and there. There we are, with that fur now done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting the teal hair and the tassels. Now for this, we're going to start with Cabalite green as a base coat. We're then going to use Nor to drop into the recesses, highlight up with Saberite green, and then just do a final highlight of Gauze Blaster green. But first of all, let's get that Cabalite green ready. So I'm just going to apply a little bit to the palette, a little bit of water. I'm using a small layer brush here because we've got some fine details to do. So what I'm going to do, I'll start this little tassel on the side here. So there's a few things to do. You've got this tassel and you've got the hair just there. There we are with that base coat now down. What we're going to do is get some Nuln Oil and just run that into the recesses. Don't need to go too mad, just make sure it's in the depths of those hair strands. There we are with the shade dry. What we're going to do now is use Say Bright Green to start highlighting some of these tassels and strands of hair. I'm just going to use the edge of the brush like so, just to get a nice consistent line. There we are, we're just going to finish off now by using Gauze Blaster Green just to do some fine edge highlighting on the teal. There we are, with the hair and tassel done. What we're going to do now is move on to painting the vial. We're going to do this in a turquoise tone, so we're going to start off first with Inky by Darkness as a base coat, we're then going to layer up with Sotek Green. After that we'll do a highlight of Temple Guard Blue, and then finish off with a couple of dots of Corax White. But first of all, let's start with the base coat. So I'm just going to get some Inky by Darkness on my palette. A bit of water again. I'm using my small layer brush here. Get a nice point. You might want to do a couple of coats of this, seeing as you've got a white undercoat. Just take your time. Try and avoid getting on the other areas you've painted. Now we're going to layer up the vial using Sotek Green. So just picking up raised areas like so, and then you've obviously got just the rim of the glass as well to do. There we are with the Sotek Green now applied. We're going to use Temple Guard Blue just to start highlighting the vial. There we are with that Temple Guard Blue highlight done. We're going to use Corax White just to pick out some of the edges by doing little dots here and there. There we are with that glass vial now done. We're going to finish the model off by painting its base. So we're going to start first by applying Nuln Oil to any stonework. Then we'll use Flayed One Flesh for the sand. After that, we're going to go to Magos Purple to pick out some details on the stonework, Gulliman Flesh for the skull, and then we'll use Gorgrunter Fur to add a bit more depth to the skull, but also to go on the stonework as well. But first of all, let's start with Nuln Oil. So I'm going to use my medium layer brush for this, just so it gives me a bit more control, and it's a little bit smaller than a shade brush. So once I've got that loaded up, I'm just going to find that stonework and then start picking it out. There we are with the stonework picked out. We're now going to start picking out the sand, and this we're using Flayed One Flesh. There we are with the sand picked out. We're now going to use Magos Purple just to drop into some of the stonework, just to give it a bit more of a purpley tint and hue. There we are with Magos Purple now applied to the stone. We're going to get Gulliman Flesh and just apply it to this skull here. With the Gulliman Flesh now done, we're going to use Gorgrunter Fur. Again, we're just going to drop some of that into like the deeper recesses of the skull, like the eyes and nose, and then the rest is just going to go around the flagstones, just add a bit of a browny hue to it. There we are, that Gorgrunter Fur now dry. What we're going to now do is finish off this base by doing some dry brushes. So we're going to start first with Flayed One Flesh, which we're going to dry brush over the stonework and a little bit on the skull. Then after that we'll use Corax White, which we're going to dry brush over the sand. Now I'm going to use an old medium base brush here because a small dry brush is probably going to be a bit too big. We might get it on other areas of the model. So that's why I'm going to use this small brush here. So I'm just going to get a little bit of Flayed One Flesh on the actual brush and then just go back and forth. Because it's old, I'm not so worried about it keeping a point. So it can definitely deal with this dry brushing. So again, as always, crisscrossing, circular motions, try and move as much as possible. And then once I'm happy, I'm ready to then start going over those flagstones. So again, just back and forth ever so gently, picking it out like so. Also go over the skull as well, just to pick out some of the raised areas of that. There we are, with the stonework now dry brush. We're just going to start dry brushing over the sand with Corax White. Once you've done that, just paint the rim of the base in the colour that matches your collection. For this, we're going to be using Abaddon Black. And there we are, with the base now painted. Vasilak the Gifted is now done. With the model now painted and based, Vasilak the Gifted and his dark pageant are ready to head off to torment the Dichasm. And remember, by following this guide, you can easily paint the other members of his warband. Now, there's a couple of things to remember when painting this model. Firstly, when doing any edge highlighting, take your time and try and maintain a nice point to your brush. And also, if you can, support your elbows and your arms on a hard surface like a table. Also, when doing any shades and contrasts, try not to overload your brush as it can quickly run out of control. If you do find that happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy painting your own dark pageant warband, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.